Welcome back to Craft Politics, everyone. I'm Joseph Lavoie, and I'm joined by my good friends, Andrew Percy and Holly Mumby-Croft. Welcome back to the show, guys.
I
How's it
like
going?
the new intro. That was really good. We don't have to worry about Andrew forgetting his own name now.
Yeah, forgetting
Brilliant.
the
I like
part
the fact
where
we
he has
used to
say
be-
his name.
We used to be allowed to introduce ourselves, but Joseph got jealous of all the attention we were getting, so it's cut us out.
He's the boss, really, though, isn't he? I normally do think Joseph is the boss.
Well, he's
Someone's
really
gotta keep
low.
us on the straight
You're
and
really
narrow.
high up, Holly. You're really high up, and he's really low.
It's true, I am, yeah. Well, I'm
Oh, that's
visiting a
true. Look
friend,
at
and
you,
they've
just
got a
peering on
gorgeous
top of
living
us,
room.
eh?
You look
I'm
like
sitting
you're
on a very
on a
comfortable
throne.
sofa. I am.
It's
Where
a
I
very
ought to
high
be.
surfer. Quite exactly.
How you guys doing? How's your weekends? Anything fun?
Great, yeah, really good.
Yeah.
There's not
Just
much
on vacation,
daylight
huh?
in the UK at the minute. It's getting dark really, really
Oh,
early.
Yeah, same
It's
here.
pretty dull, but it's all right.
It gets even darker, even earlier in Scunthorpe than in Vancouver. I looked up last year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes,
But it's
every
bright sunshine here today. It's a really lovely day today.
Yeah.
Joseph's probably been for a run at 5 o'clock this morning.
No, but I will go and I'll go for
I
one
owe you
later.
an apology anyway, Joseph.
What?
Because a work apology.
A work
'Cause
apology, yeah.
I was
Are we
on.
talking-
We were on a call yesterday, and I said, "Oh, look, no one's perfect." And then I realised you were on the call, so I feel like obviously I need to apologise now because everyone does believe you to be perfect. So
Not quite, but yeah. I know
not
you guys are not
quite,
football
but very
fans.
close to.
I know.
Not quite, but very close to. Yes.
What am I supposed to say?
Just say no. I'm like every other human being. I've erred. I've got imperfections, many of them, but no, you're like we're almost perfect.
Oh, look, I did have my birthday on the weekend. So yeah, I am feeling the age a little bit more. 1 year.
I think, was it the
later.
big
I wish. Oh man. Yeah. No. 42. 42 was a big number.
Josh, I genuinely thought older, but happy birthday anyway.
Oh,
He's
thank
still
you.
the oldest
Thank
one
you.
on the call. This is me being very kind to Andrew. I hope you appreciate
I know, I
that's
was
my
like, thank you,
once yearly kind remark in your direction.
I think I know the answer to this because I know you're both not massive football fans. So I'm going to assume neither one of you watched the Canadian Premier League final on the weekend.
Sorry, that's that
I was
again.
going to watch
Do that
it.
again.
It had
Holly was
And-
going to watch it, but what, you found anything else to do?
Well, there was a rumour going around that just a couple of doors down from us, some new people have moved in and they'd painted and they said we could go watch the paint dry in their new house. So I went and did that.
You know what? That might be sometimes true, but it was a game played in 20 centimeters of snow, and there was an amazing bicycle kick by this Mexican player who has never played in the snow before. It went all viral on the internet. It was a lot of fun, so that was a great moment for the sport in Canada.
That explains the image that popped up on my Google whatever of somebody dressed as a footballer running through snow and ice. That's what that was then.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
I thought that was a weird thing to appear. I just thought, no. Thought I must have Googled something a bit strange once. And then, the algorithm had fed me that. But anyway.
All right, so we're gonna talk 3 stories today. We're gonna talk about crap going down at BBC. I will, of course, talk about the federal budget, which seems like it was an eternity ago at this point. And then we're gonna do some follow up on all things related to the trade war and Doug Ford's popularity numbers. So why don't we get started with the BBC story? This one was yours, Holly, so I'll let you tee us up.
It was mine, but it was also my mum's because mum rang me absolutely in the embryonic stages of this. And I was on holiday and she rang me. I don't know where she gets her information from, but she was to do this when we were in Parliament as well, didn't she, Andrew? She always knew what was about to happen. So
Exactly.
whatever her sources are, they're decent. So yeah, she rang me about it, and then it's really grown some legs over the last few days. And Tim Davie, who was the Director General of the BBC, and I'm sure everyone knows what the BBC is, but it's our public service broadcaster here in the UK. He's resigned along with another very senior member of the BBC team shortly after news came out that the BBC Panorama programme had made a documentary which was, I think, played about a week before the US elections, and they'd spliced together some various bits of Donald Trump's speech, which was a really long speech, and it had given an impression that was quite different to what the content of the speech had actually been. And for some people, it made it look like he had incited people to go and do the storming that happened on, I think, the 6th of January after the elections. Pretty big deal here in the UK. BBC is just such an institution for us. It feels, I mean, we have to pay for it as well. I don't think you guys have that in Canada, do you? But we have to pay. It's like 175 quid a year for the BBC.
When I saw that in the when I was doing my own research on this story, I didn't realize that's how expensive it was. Like it's absurd to me, that price.
And
for
you,
what
and
get.
you can't avoid it, right? I mean, you have to pay it. I mean, it's actually still a criminal offence, isn't it? So,
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the
it is.
type of the edit that's in question more specifically, so is like in the actual speech, he said, Trump that is, said, we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. But in the Panorama edit, he was instead shown saying, we're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. And what
Which
they
is like,
took was
it's outrageous to do that, isn't it? I mean,
outrageous.
honestly.
And the gap between those two sentences was something like 50 minutes. Like you can't even argue, oh, it was kind of close. And we're trying to, like, we're just being efficient with our edits to demonstrate what he was trying to say. Like it's just so unreasonable. It's crazy.
but
And it just,
it goes
the
further than
damage
that.
it does to the BBC. Sorry, go on, Andrew.
No, I was going to say, but it goes further than that, right? So there was the Telegraph had got hold of this internal report there, the Prescott report, which had then made a whole series of other allegations as well, one of which I'll say a bit on. But I got the list up today. So the accusations were that principal were the Donald Trump just lying about him. And he's obviously now threatening to sue the BBC for $1 billion. But it was also that the LGBT editor or reporter had silenced voices which were gender critical on the whole trans debate. Now, look, we don't need to get into that. But what we do need to, I think, accept is that a public broadcaster should put different sides of the argument on that, particularly when, so I tried to shut that down. There was the allegation of bias around the coverage in the Middle East, particularly on the BBC Arabic service. But I just got a couple of the others up. So there was a false claim by BBC Verify, which is their kind of fact checking. So it's always that question of who checks the fact checkers, which had that ethnic minority drivers were being deliberately overcharged car insurance. But that was false. There was a distorted claim about rising job insecurity for ethnic minority workers. The BBC uses these push notifications, and given how big of an issue migration has been in the UK, not a single push notification to its 7 million followers about migration issues, and which is something actually lots of us had raised previously. When I was still in Parliament, I met with one of the senior BBC folks to raise my concerns about the Middle East coverage in relation to Israel, and I said, here are some of the examples of what you have push notificationed out. Right, which is a deliberate choice. And it was example, that false claim about Israel bombing a hospital very early on, which was entirely false. The BBC had push notification that out straight away. And they didn't push notification out, I don't think, the retraction on that. But they're just the number of stories they've had to correct, particularly on their BBC Arabic service. Now, there's a really good piece in the Telegraph written by a member of the Jewish community, I think, saying that, Jews have felt in the UK, and we have all felt this very significant, that we've been gaslit for the last couple of years because we've been watching this coverage of the Middle East. I've submitted over 150 complaints about it. Lots of these I was submitting when I was chair of the parliamentary group against anti-Semitism, the all-party group. We raised these concerns very early on, and we're constantly told there's nothing to see here, nothing to see here, and it is a form of gaslighting. That there's this like, oh no, you're all imagining this. Well, there's been this internal email, this internal report, which has demonstrated not only what we thought was true, but factually there have been these examples of very significant bias on the coverage of that issue. And I don't know what Holly thinks, but like the political fallout of it is it kind of all just plays into Reform's hands again, right? Of the system, the establishment. But I'm a big defender of the BBC, actually. I think the BBC is a brilliant British export. Yeah, I think the BBC is a brilliant British export, right? It's world news coverage I generally was always very defensive of. But I think that's just become real. And the fact is, it does all these political programs. It has such a good news coverage. It has good local news. And like, if we lost the BBC, I think we'd lose a lot of the programs they produce. I mean, the Celebrity Traitors I've just been watching. So these are brilliant. Never mind its period dramas, all the rest of it, right? It's a great British export. But I think I don't know what Holly thinks on this, but like I think a lot of people on the centre right politics do look at the BBC and just know it's not for them now. It just feels like it is. We see it even in the local news, right? Even in the local news, I had a local news reporter who, after the 2017 general election, kind of told me privately. She said, "You would not believe how distraught the local BBC newsroom was after the Brexit referendum, because they were all Remainers, even though our area was heavily Leave, and after the 2017 general election because Jeremy Corbyn hadn't won." This was a local news reporter saying this to me. So it just feels like everyone knows it's biased, right, Holly? That's what everyone thinks and feels if you're on our
I
side of
agree.
politics.
A lot of people think it's biased, but it is important for it's part of the British culture. It's part of the soft reasons that people come to this country, want to visit this country. It's often, people listen to it abroad and everything else. I mean, I listen to the Archers. That is like my absolutely sacred part of the BBC. And last time I saw Tim Davie, which is when we were in Parliament, I did try to extract from him some assurances on not messing with the format of the Archers, and he didn't oblige. So, sorry for his troubles and everything, but guess he had to move on. There's a couple of other things on that list as well, Andrew. Really serious stuff like the Hugh Edwards stuff. They've had all the problems with the showing that footage of Bob Villan at Glastonbury. There's been
Oh,
some
yeah,
really, difficult stuff over recent
failures.
times for the BBC, and it doesn't take a lot to lose the reputation. It really doesn't. I think they're in massive danger of that. And a lot of people I know just actually don't want to pay the amount of money that we have to pay for it. I don't want to pay 175 quid a year basically to listen to the Archers, because there's very, very little BBC stuff that I consume. And they got rid of a lot of their local journalism on radio as well. That happened when we were both
Yes.
in Parliament, which
Yeah.
was something that people were really upset about. So for me, the direction the BBC is going in leaves it really vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think the idea that you can reform it as well is difficult, because it's people in it have to accept that there's an issue, right? And one of the other things you always saw as well was when after the Brexit vote on BBC Question Time, for example, and Guido Fawkes' website was very good at highlighting this. You'd have a panel of 5, 4 of them would be Remainers, there'd be 1 Leaver. The audience would be heavily Remain, and all this. Everyone just feels it. Just feels it's. But what's I think this is why I've come to the point where we have to do something about this now, and it could be something very significant in a way that I wouldn't have done before, because I can the BBC, it'll balance itself out. And it's not necessarily that they're pro-Labour. It's more that they are pro a certain demographic of person, right? Who has a certain set of values and views. So they're just that kind of, I think you call them like middle class, university educated kind of that type of person who has this set of views, and therefore they can't. Or I think almost they can't understand why anybody doesn't. Everyone else just shares those views. It's not even that they're deliberately going out there being pro-Labour, although some of them may be. It's more like just these people over here who have these other views on all these issues are evil, are not just a different view. They're like just fundamentally wrong and dangerous, whereas everyone should think this. So they probably think that they're doing the world a favour by keeping these people off. But the problem is, I don't think you've even seen some of the response to it is like people accusing it of being like a right-wing plot, that this is like a stretch plot. No, they're like just demonstrably have like put out biased coverage, and in the case of President Trump, actually just lied. And there are still people within the institution who are apparently trying to defend all of this stuff and saying there's nothing unusual here. So I just think they're so infiltrated, as it were, with these kind of thoughts. I'm not sure how you turn this into.
Do you does this become does the BBC then become a little bit like what the CBC became in Canada for the right? So it has for a long time, defunding the CBC was a mantra of the right. It was a great fundraising vehicle for the Conservative Party for a very long time. And of course, there's always, it's almost impossible to get through an election cycle without at least someone on the right side of politics advocating that we stop taxpayer funded investments in CBC. Do you think that this becomes a tipping point, unless maybe it's already happening, where reform actually uses this as a significant campaign issue, potentially even as a wedge?
I think so. If
It was
they
an
were
issue.
able to put forward a suggestion of how to do it that didn't completely obliterate the BBC and the bits that people are attached to, because there are elements of it that people will be emotionally and intellectually attached to. But if they put forward a different funding model, which meant you didn't definitely have to give them 175 quid a year just because you watch live TV, even if you're only watching Channel 4, I think that would be really, really appealing to people. And actually, just very quickly, because I'll ask Andrew to answer that, but very quickly on the BBC Verify, when that sort of reared its head over recent years, I just really gets on my nerves. I'm like, are we not verifying this stuff already? I kind of thought that's what the BBC did all the time anyway. Do we need like a whole department to actually check what we're saying is accurate? It's crazy.
Yep, totally. There's just on the, so there was already a campaign to defund the BBC and to scrap the licence fee, and a lot of Conservative MPs were signed up to that. I never was, because I kind of thought the BBC was still worth saving, because the BBC World Service is a really important tool for, Britain's soft power globally, the exports of TV programmes made by the BBC for entertainment. I think those are really important for Britain's soft power. It's just the kind of domestic news that used to really get on my tits. But there was a poll out by YouGov this Monday, I think, or last week, it was, saying that over 51% of the public believe the BBC to be biased. And most of those people, unsurprisingly, believe it to be biased in a left-wing direction. And it's something like 73% of Reform voters, 52% of Conservative voters believe it to be left-wing bias. So I think that there's just a perception that, when you've got half the public thinking you're biased, it's, and that's why I think GB News, which is kind of seen as the kind of right-wing alternative to the BBC, has done so well, because people see voices on there that they're just not used to seeing on the BBC, and you're like, oh, thank goodness, somebody's speaking like I am, someone's saying it like I am, and not being. And I used to, as I say, boiled my piss when I used to watch the coverage post Brexit, where they'd just put somebody on who would say something stupid about Brexit, and then contrast them with some super educated person who would make the case for Remain. And it was all very deliberate, as opposed to actually putting somebody on who was going to make the proper arguments for Brexit. It all just felt like it was such a smug kind of belittling, looking down the noses at all these silly working class northerners who voted for Brexit. It just that oozed through their coverage. But what they're very good at is just gaslighting everyone. As I say, they've gaslight the Jewish community. They just gaslight people and say, oh, no, that's not true. We have all these strict editorial standards, and you're seeing things that don't really exist. And I remember what they said to me when I met them, one of their guys on their coverage, but people complain that we're pro-Israel, too pro-Israel. So that kind of, as if that makes it okay. I was like, well, there's an organised campaign to write into the BBC about the coverage by certain people in the UK to present it as being pro-Israel. There's an organised campaign to do that. That, you can't just say, well, because we get this many numbers on this and this many numbers on this, then that proves we're balanced. It's that you have to actually do a proper subjective study of whether you're balanced or not just say, well, a lot of people complain to us that we're balanced, that we're biased in this way, therefore it means it's like we must be doing a good job. No, not at all.
I think as well, viewership is aging, isn't it? Because I don't consume live BBC pretty much ever. If I'll very occasionally watch something maybe live, but it's not something I do. Whereas my grandparents watched it every single night after they'd had their tea, as we posh people call it dinner, we call it tea. They had their tea and then they watched the local news, and my parents watch the local news a little bit and they will watch it live. But I think as people, and you probably do, Andrew, because you're a bit older, but like people my age and Joseph's age, we don't consume it live like people did in the past. So it has to change.
The whole model just seems so archaic when you think about it. Pay 175 quid to access live television when so much of people's media consumption habits are not happening through a traditional screen, that's happening in their pockets on their handheld devices. The whole thing's going to have to change. I mean, from a funding model, let alone just these it's domino effect that the BBC is suffering through with all these one scandal after the next. So my guess is, hot prediction, you don't think that a new director general being appointed to the BBC is really going to do a whole lot to change the narrative around the BBC anytime soon?
Not unless it's me or Andrew. If it's anyone else, he's hopeless. I don't think it's going to survive.
The thing is, they'll probably, in classic BBC style, appoint somebody who's even more left wing, right? Somebody who's even more woke or whatever. But Lisa Nandy, who's the culture secretary, has announced this big review. Now, what makes me chuckle about this is we were doing a review, if you remember, of the BBC. We announced it, I think, in the Boris government, and we ended up scrapping it because there was all this outrage from the left that we were attacking this institution. And on so many issues, on so many things we were when we were in government, because there was noise, we ran away from it, right? And this is the biggest failure of the various Tory prime ministers we served under, is that they ran away whenever there was noise, of which the BBC was very good at generating that noise on lots of these issues. And we ran away, and that's why I think the Conservative Party is struggling to respond, because we had the opportunity to do something about this. If we knew all this was happening and we didn't do it.
Yeah.
Just on the license fee, I don't know whether you remember Bill Bryson. Do you remember him, the author? Brilliant, like travel literature. And he once wrote about the when he moved to Britain in like the 70s or 80s, whatever. And he said like he always realized that communism had been tried in the wrong country. He said because they should have tried it in Britain, because Brits love lining up. We were tolerant of dictatorships, as Margaret Thatcher proved, and you had to pay a license to have a television. Like he was like because when you say to people like outside of the country, like the concept that to own a television, to plug your TV in and watch something, you have to have a license for it. And we're just used to it, right? It's like it's actually a crazy concept, right?
Do you remember those adverts that they used to have? So if you didn't have a TV license, like that, you would catch you like this van was driving around with this giant satellite dish on the back, and it would know if you didn't have a TV license, and they would knock on your door. Honestly,
yeah, and it was always the adverts were hysterical as well, because it was like Mrs. Smith is watching Coronation Street in number 34. And it was like, and you were like, but apparently, I don't know whether this is true, but I read that those were completely, all of that was a lie, right? They couldn't like tell what TV you were watching, what room you were watching it. It was like, but it was like, you have to look at some of the TV adverts, the TV licensing authority, whatever it was, like with this really like sinister voice is like, you know, have you paid your TV license? And it's like they were really sinister adverts. But
do you remember you used to be able to pay a bit less and get a black and white license? Do you remember that?
Yeah, you could get a black and white.
I knew you would, because you're really, really old. I can't remember that.
I can remember it. And the worst thing is as well, like you can be one person and have two properties, and you can only watch one TV at a time, but you have to pay for two TV licenses. So I'm still paying two TV licenses in the UK. Which is like, because you can't take it with you. It doesn't follow you. And it's not like a Netflix subscription.
Man, that's absurd. That is truly absurd.
To pay for three, not because I had three houses, but because I had one house that I lived in, and then the London flat for being an MP, because you can't be claiming a TV license on your expenses.
Yeah,
and I paid for my child's TV license where they lived, because I was like, you must have a TV license, I'll just pay it. So it was 3 TV licenses at one point.
We once got done for not paying the TV license when I was at university. And it was the funniest thing ever, because I lived with two lads, Pete and Dave. And Pete was at home one day, and I got back and he's like the TV licensing people have locked on the door. And he said, but I've said we've got a license because we gave Dave the money, didn't we? For it? I was like, yeah, we all gave Dave the money. So we gave Dave the money for the TV license. Dave never went and bought the TV because you had to go to the post.
Went to the pub?
No, you used to have to go to the post office to get the TV license, right? That was it. You went to the post office to get the TV license. Bit like your vehicle excise duty license for your car as well. You had to go to the post office. That's why no one goes to post offices anymore, because you do it all online. But yeah, so I did once. But then the guy actually was really kind, because he gave us a warning and said, if you pay it within 7 days. So when Dave got back, we were like, because it was quite a big fine.
Like institutional fear in all of us that you might somehow not have this license, and it's scary.
So Boris Johnson said he was going to stop paying unless Tim Davie resigned, and I remember looking at that thinking, oh, I don't know if I could dare do that, because I'm still traumatized.
He's going to prison.
Yes, I'll say he's going to jail, and he'll go to jail for longer than anyone who commits an actual crime, right? Because they'll be like, you know, you just know. Yeah, because I thought about it, all I could think of is those adverts from the 80s. I was thinking, oh, that's brave of him. I daren't. And like, you know, I'm not going to knock on my door when I'm in Canada. But I was like, oh no. I was like, I can't not have the TV license. It'll be like, it's like the worst crime you can commit.
Yes.
Anyway, but there's all this full review going on. It's just, but it's like, again, it's another, just to end on a serious point, is for reform, open door. Another thing about the institutions of the country not working for ordinary people, you know, the system being against you, the system being against reform politicians in particular. So I think, again, it's another thing like they just whatever. These gifts just keep landing in their lap.
Well, I wonder if Trump is successful for $1 billion, which is the threatened lawsuit that he's going to drop by Friday if there's no corrective action. I wonder how many licenses that equals. Someone have to do the math on that.
They'll have to go up. Our license fee.
Who is he going to? Are we the BBC? Do we all own the BBC? Would we have to pay?
It's a corporation.
Who's give him £1 billion?
Tax increases. Speaking of expensive things, It seems like a long time ago, but we did have a budget presented last week in Canada, and there's been a lot of political drama that ensued. So let's get our listeners caught up. We recorded the show this time last week. It was right before the budget was announced. And as I say, a lot has happened. So Prime Minister Carney has since then successfully cleared 2 confidence votes tied to the budget. You'll recall when we talked about this last week, that's important because minority government situation, matters of confidence, could trigger an election. And so we are inching closer to the next vote, which will be I think it's next week when the House resumes. But funny enough, it's Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, that's been put on defensive footing pretty much all of last week. He had one member of parliament cross the floor and another that announced plans to retire from parliament. And so if you read a lot of the mainstream media coverage in the post-budget environment, it's all about Pierre Poilievre's leadership coming into question. There's also been gossip about whether the leader's office, Pierre Poilievre's office, was using opposition research to threaten caucus members who were considering a floor crossing. So it's gotten all just a little bit messy. And the timing of this, of course, being important because Pierre Poilievre is facing a leadership review in January. So lots in the go here. All matters, I think, because caucus management, I think, is important, and it's important when you're heading into a leadership review. I don't think any of this at the moment has any real impact on Pierre Poilievre's leadership review performance. I suspect he'll still perform really well at that because he's soliciting votes from the membership base. But I'm wondering, the two of you watching, well, Holly, maybe you watching a little bit more from afar. Andrew, you've been closer to the action here in Canada. But do you think? So it's really, I wanted to talk about the budget, but for a second, let's talk about Pierre Poilievre. Does he have a leadership crisis on his hands with the way this has all developed over the last sort of 6-7 days?
Well, I think if you lose 2 of your caucus members, obviously one of them is a mate of mine who I saw just the weekend before all this happened. And so, look, I mean, whatever, this allegation that they've used their own, like, kind of information about their MPs on their own people is pretty grim, right? I mean, first of all, leaving aside and Holly will attest to this, like the mental health impact this job can do on you anyway, knowing then that things that may have been said in confidence or just things about your private life could be then used by the people who were your own side just to stop you making a political decision is, I think, pretty grim. But let's not dwell on that too much, other than to say I don't know whether that helps in the future management of an organization when people see that, because it's not just then people who are going to potentially cross the floor or leave who might think it'd be used against them. It's like, well, what if I have an issue on a policy? What if I'm like this? Is this what they're going to whip out at me? It's I think a really, really silly thing to do to try and manage a caucus, right?
Just for our listeners who may not be playing the political game for a living, just a little bit more context here. So often when a party is recruiting candidates to seek public office, you'll do what's called opposition research. You will dig through their history. You'll find out things that they may have said in the past, things they may have done, so that you can be better prepared should the opposition attack you, that you know what's coming, that you've unearthed every skeleton in someone's closet. That is done, obviously, as a way to protect the political brand, and it's a way to be extremely prepared for any potential attack that comes your way. And I think the assumption for most candidates would be that information is kept locked and key, and it's used purely as a defensive measure to predict what might come your way. It is certainly not used as a weapon to threaten your own caucus members. And I'm of two minds on this. I think it is absolutely, if true, that the leader's office for the party is using that kind of information against its own caucus members. I just think that's just a line crossed, it's just crossing a line. It's completely inappropriate behavior. It is absolute bullying. But, I think every caucus member knows, whether they like it or not, that this file exists on them. It's just modern day politics. And so the challenge I have now is, to your point, Andrew, what is the signal to potential future recruits? I mean, it's already getting more and more difficult to recruit talented people. I mean, as we see a massive schism right now, as I look at the screen, one very talented former member of parliament versus one maybe not so. Holly, that's you.
Oh, Holly, that's really unfair. That's really unfair.
But
wow, that's nasty.
How do we get more Hollies? How do we get more Hollies in the politics? They can't. the Hollies of the world are not going to want to seek public office if they're like, this is what's entailed. I may have said one dumbass thing when I was in university. Maybe as a part of my life, I've since moved on for it. Like, we're all allowed to be humans. We're all allowed to make mistakes. We're all allowed to have a life before politics. But if that entire life before politics is going to put on full display as a weapon, I think we're just creating conditions to make it impossible to recruit good people, talented people, qualified people for public office. And it puts me in a rather depressive state.
I wonder as well, Joseph, what do you think about the message that sends to opponents and to the public when there's an allegation that people are stooping or having to stoop to that level? It doesn't make the caucus look strong. It doesn't make the party management look strong. For me, that looks like a weak way to behave, if indeed true.
Well, and
Yeah,
also,
do they, the big test is, does the Conservative Party Canada look like a government in waiting? And when you got this kind of alleged behavior, then no, I don't think it passes the test. And we're already like, it's not like the Conservative Party isn't in the strongest position right now, certainly on the leadership numbers. And so I think it adds a stench around the brand unnecessarily so. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Also, there's that element of like, so hang on, you guys knew all this about these people apparently, but
Yeah.
it was okay.
Yeah, no problems them putting your name on the ballot.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I mean, and lots of that stuff that exists in these kind of files is like, tittle tattle and go. We used to hear it all the time in the chamber. Do you remember, like, that time we ourselves, Holly, guessed the wrong person for a scandal?
It was more than a guess. It was a full investigation, which we carried out incredibly diligently over a great deal of time and reached literally the absolute wrong conclusion.
One conclusion about a particular story and scandal that actually involved a different colleague entirely. But at least we didn't tell anyone. We just talked to each other about it. But we were totally convinced.
We congratulated each other, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, oh yes, but it's all this like, but it's like these, half of this stuff's tittle tattle anyway, right? But it's just, you are going to destroy someone's life because of their personal foibles or mistakes, whether these are true or not. In any of these cases, like, who knows, and like, but it's the whole. It's just, I think it's like it doesn't really look prime ministerial, right? And when you're already lagging in the polls on the prime ministerial numbers, as best leader, it's not great. Now, I have said to you a number of times, Joseph, in private conversations about, where, do I think that, whether after an election you get rid or not of a leader, whether, have an second chance, we've talked about that previously. But I think none of this is good for the Conservatives. So I don't know. The best thing you can do in a situation like that where people, because of course it's now allowed the Liberal MP who did cross from Nova Scotia to start talking about the people around Pierre Poilievre operating like a fraternity and as, schoolboy bullies almost. So you kind of like open, I think in many ways, the best thing you can do when someone deflects is, something like that is to, it's almost do, you can do the whole, their constituents didn't vote for this, they should submit themselves to a by-election, yada, 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 but, blah, 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 let them go. This kind of trying to fight them and destroy them as individuals makes no difference to the bigger political picture between the two parties. It just potentially makes you look quite nasty and unpleasant.
Yeah. Did you guys experience floor crossings when you guys were?
Yeah, loads.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm curious what the dynamic is like within caucus. Like, do you get really pissed off with those that cross the floor? Or is it like, oh, this is just the way this game plays out? Like, how does that get received internally?
I mean, oftentimes people would put a bit of a brave face on it, wouldn't we? And kind of say, well, we thought they were going to do that anyway. They've been saying such and such for quite a long time, so it's not a huge surprise. Or sometimes people would believe that they'd been, not necessarily the case, but that they'd been offered some incentive to do it. Or, it was always those kind of conversations. But I don't remember ever being especially devastated. And then we've had people who've left the party post-election, some of whom I've known quite well, who, to be honest, I've just stayed friends with and haven't been that surprised they've done it. As long as they do it in sort of a decent way and just do it, I think it's never been a massive problem to me personally.
We had loads between 17 and 19 because we had the whole Change UK lot where some defected from us, some defected from Labour, formed this new party. We had a couple went to the Lib Dems. And I stayed, pally with all the ones if I like them before, I like them after. But it's that kind of thing, right? Whenever anybody crosses the floor, defects, right? The party that's losing them says, this is disgusting, it's an insult to their electorate, blah, 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 blah. They should resign now and do all this. And then when one comes the other way, people go, this was a principled decision.
Yeah.
They recognise that the values of the party they were in just don't align actually anymore. That party's moved away. Our values align. All this kind of stuff. So everyone's a freaking hypocrite about it. The worst thing is that it's the ones who cross the floor as MPs who had themselves previously sponsored legislation calling for a recall election for anyone who crosses. And I remember that was one of the ones who'd gone from us to the Lib Dems. She'd previously sponsored a private member's bill to prevent that happening without a by-election. So everyone turns up to be there's all that nastiness. I remember when Christian Wakefoot went, he defected from Labour to Conservative, from Conservative to Labour, sorry. There was quite a bit of nastiness in the WhatsApp groups and all this stuff about him. People did that. I'd worked with him on the anti-Semitism stuff. So I thought the best way to deal with these people is I sent him a message saying, on the day defected, saying, I think you've made a mistake. I'm very sorry to see you go, but we work together on these issues and we'll continue to work together on these issues. And I just said, just ignore the noise. You can tell you think it's a mistake. I don't agree with you, but you don't have to be a dick about it. Just send it there,
Yeah.
rather than the job is already bad enough from a mental health point of view. And whatever people's reason for leaving, personal preferment, personal bitterness, whatever, it's just, it's part of life, right?
Yeah. I think about it in a professional context. If when you leave a job and you go to another job, or you change, sometimes people do leave to go work for a competitor. It's really fucking annoying in the business context, but then you don't go out and scorch earth on them, right? There's a certain expectation around professional conduct that seems to not always apply in politics, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I think that for the Conservatives, the political outcome of all this, of course, is I don't think the Conservatives come out of this enhanced. One, because they've lost caucus members who were saying bad things, but also the way they handled it. Two, it seems the contrast is still, the big numbers are still Carney much more preferred as Prime Minister than Pierre Poilievre, but the parties are still kind of polling fairly similar. And what's interesting is, I think rising up if you look at the issues polling, is cost of living is moving slowly back up again, right? As unemployment's going up and all the rest of it. So you kind of and confidence in the Carney government is waning a little bit. It's still very high. People would still prefer him as Prime Minister. But the kind of Conservatives have the opportunity to turn this onto, but to do that, you have to address your weaknesses, one of which is, the leadership. And does this, just polling much lower? And does this kind of behavior help in the public's mind of making you look like, as you say, government in rating as reasonable, nice people? And I don't think it does. So I think it's an entirely self-defeating thing. And also just kind of personally nasty.
Yeah. So it's funny, we were supposed to talk about the budget. We ended up talking about floor crossings and Pierre Poilievre's leadership, but I think we'll have opportunities to talk about the budget again because it was a big fucking massive spend budget. There will be consequences for that, so we'll have plenty of opportunities to come back.
Is it the biggest deficit in Canadian history?
It is. Well, you'll recall the pre-positioning, to the extent that there was any of this budget, was that this was going to be a generational budget. A generational moment. And I'm trying to think about the big generational moments that we've had in the last, 15, 20, 30 years. I think it's safe to say maybe the pandemic counts as one of those, because I don't know that in five or 6 years time we're going to go, fuck that 2025 Canadian federal budget was a generational moment. Transformational. I could be wrong. I think expectations are so out of whack, but it's a shit ton of spending. Sorry, there's a lot of operation. There's I think some $13 billion of operational cuts, and all the spending a lot of spending is being categorized as long-term investments. I really, really, really hope that those investments play out. And of course, the definition of investment is you only really realize whether the investment is successful after a good chunk of time has passed. But in the short term, the deficit's just fucking ginormous, and I'm scared about it. But anyway,
and actually, the Conservative leadership, though, by their own behaviour, have stopped themselves talking about that, right? Because they've been talking about these other issues. I mean, you still have to do that, but actually they should have just said, okay, part these two individuals, they go off, do what they do. We can say how terrible it is they've got elected as Conservatives and now they're going off and doing this. However, the bigger issue here is the saddling of debt to Canadians, things, and that they've damaged their ability to talk about those things, which is why you said we were meant to talk about the budget, but we didn't, because the political narrative hasn't been about the budget. The political noise has all been about this internal Conservative stuff, right?
Yeah. And the popularity numbers around Pierre Poilievre. But speaking of popular Conservative leaders in this country, you wanted to talk about Holly's favorite Conservative leader, right? Doug Ford.
Yeah, I just did this as this whole where these anti-tariff ads, you'll remember the adverts misquoting Reagan, which is quite funny, really, when you think it was like the allegation against the BBC has been splicing Trump. Well, that Ontario ad did splice Reagan, didn't it? In different parts of the speech, and also failed to add the context that it was a speech about imposing tariffs. So maybe there's a similar thing gone on there. But anyway, he stood. But we talked about this the other week. But since then, of course, British Columbia has pulled its ads it was going to run in the US, which still leads me to conclude that this story isn't over yet as to whether this was a sensible thing or a really stupid thing. However, this is only a small item, just for Holly's joy, really, is that despite all of this noise about about those ads, it has made no difference to his ratings in Ontario. The Abacus data, I think it is, their monthly tracking still found the Progressive Conservatives holding steady at 51% in Ontario. So I think basically Holly has to move to Ontario because it turns out 51% of people in Ontario are still sticking with Doug Ford and the Conservatives. Your man has...
I know, I can see why. He's just... Do you know what? I was thinking about this today. There's this word that the young kids use, riz. This is what Doug Ford has. He has riz. There's just something about him that is, I think it's short for charisma or something. Like, he just has this thing about him.
Thanks for clarifying.
Crikey. Yeah, he really does have something about him. I think he's destined for very, very high office. And if and when that happens, we're going to just rewind this video, which young people won't know what that is, but we'll rewind this podcast and we'll replay this moment of discussion, and I'll be proved to be right. Because there's just something about him. He's a real quality politician, in my opinion.
And
Wow.
why do you think that, Holly? Is just because he comes off as empathetic and sort of on your side?
It's purely based on my confidence in my own instinct. There's just nothing else behind that at all. It is just my gut feeling, and I really like him, and I think he's going places. Well, you know,
How many
he's places
times
already, isn't he? But
how many times a day do you think of him?
he's
Is
my
he, like,
Roman
on your mind
Empire.
all day?
This is what you want to know. Yeah, Doug Ford is Holly's Roman Empire, and I think about him a lot because, honestly, I've just got a feeling. I think he's great. He's really good.
Do you sometimes, when you're doing the washing up at the sink, like, do you just stare out of the back window and think, "Oh, Doug Ford"?
Well, in Scunthorpe, Andrew, we have these things called dishwashers, which I know probably haven't reached you yet. But no, I just think I've got this feeling there's something about Doug Ford. We're going to see an awful lot more of him. So you heard it here first. Do you two not agree? How do you two feel? How do you two feel? Do you not agree?
No, I think he is a very skilled retail politician. I think he's a very skilled retail politician, and I think he's got a really good pulse in the sense of, and there's a reason why he's performed as well as he has at the ballot box for as long as he has, which is pretty rare in Ontario politics. Well, sorry, it's not that rare. I suppose you could point to previous Bill Davis governments as being ones that sort of survived for a good chunk of time, but different era, different time. And I think when we talked about this, I don't know whether it made the cut, but I was like, I can see that I think Canadians have, on this specific issue, on the tariff war, that Canadians can be of two minds, that they can want someone to stand up and fight for them, while at the same time wanting someone who is going to get a deal and like make this problem go away in some way, shape, or form. And I think whenever Canadians feel like they need someone to like spit in Donald Trump's face, Doug Ford does a really good job of doing that in a way that's, I think, approachable, and he does it while communicating very well on American television. And so, yeah, I think he's got appeal for a lot of people.
I mean, a lot of the federal Conservatives hate him, right? Because they don't think he's a Conservative. Because in the last federal election, he was kind of nice to Carney, and there was all these memes of him pulling off his T-shirt and it revealing a big, massive L for Liberal. So quite a lot of that more right-wing Conservatives federally hate him. They loathe him. But he keeps winning elections in Ontario, so as a Conservative, so... You know.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing. I think some of the federal Conservatives might want to take some fucking lessons from Doug Ford.
Well,
maybe not on how to be.
Yes, that's not a lesson many of them seem prepared to take, though, because, you know, to too many of them, it's very much, you know, just have this
Doug
binary
Ford
view
threatens his caucus with Oppo research.
Yeah.
I don't want to be rude to you, Andrew, because I know it's a sore subject because you lost in 2024. But actually, the ability to win elections, it's actually a really important skill for a politician, and that's a skill Doug Ford has. So I
Well,
retain my view that he is a quality act, and we'll see what happens.
because you don't do your own washing up, you've got a dishwasher, I will just instead picture you just staring out of the front window and just thinking of Doug Ford, knocking on your door to see if you're going to vote for him.
I'll vote.
You're
If
going to
I
wait
was
a
in
long
Ontario,
while.
I'd love to vote for him. Yeah, I definitely would.
There's
Well,
probably a Broughton,
sure.
Ontario. So there's probably a Broughton, Ontario or a Scunthorpe, Ontario where he can appear. There's a
Yeah.
Whitby and a Scarborough. So.
I think we can all agree if he's got one of his big skills is when he wants to, he can communicate pretty well. Speaking of comms, let's close out with our lipstick on a gerbil segment. Because there's someone who did have to do some comms last week. It's a bit more of a lighthearted one. But we're talking about Prince Harry. Can I still call him Prince Harry? Prince Harry, Game 4 of the World Series, which was in Los Angeles, was sat in the owner's box or the owner's, row. I don't know if it was a box, wearing an LA Dodgers cap, sat next to his wife, Megan. And that caused a little bit of kerfuffle in Canada. And it so happened that he then, a week later, had to come to Canada because he does a lot of work for veterans and veteran support, which I'm obviously a huge fan of. And so he was in Toronto having to do some media around the True Patriot Love Gala, which is this gala that's always done on the margins of Remembrance Day. CTV News asked him about the LA Dodger cap and the response to it. So I'll pull up the clip. We can get a listen to the interview, which I think lasts about 55 seconds, and then we'll make sense of it. So obviously the gerbil that needs some lipsticking on is the fact that Prince Harry was cheering for the Dodgers when many Canadians felt he should have been cheering for the Jays.
The Stanley Cup, right? That was it, yeah.
Say it all about wearing that LA Dodgers hat last week and getting into hot
LA
water.
Dodgers hatgate. Well, firstly, I would like to apologise to Canada for wearing it. Secondly, I was under duress. There wasn't much choice. I was invited to the LA Dodgers box or the dugout by the owner himself, so I was doing what I thought was the polite thing to do. But I'm going to wear this from now on to make sure I don't make any more of those mistakes. But the other piece to this was, as you could probably relate, when you're missing a lot of hair on top and you're sitting under floodlights, you'll take any hat that's available. So, Game 5, Game 6, Game 7, I was Blue Jays throughout. Now that I've admitted that, it's going to be really hard for me to return back to Los Angeles. But no, I'm very sorry to the Canadian public. Devastated that the Blue Jays lost, but go Jays.
I think I've given that one three coats. I had just about everything in it. Dealt with it. Lots of humor, self-deprecating humor, corrective action. He's put a stake in the ground. He can't walk back from this anymore, so he can't flip-flop more than he already has. Also, it's incredibly lighthearted, and let's not take this too seriously. So I'm going to give this one, I think this might be the first lipstick on a gerbil segment I've certainly given a 3 to. What do you guys think?
I'll give it a 3 as well because I have no idea what he's even talking about. So he was wearing a hat for a different team
at the World Series,
and he did
For
it
the
because
final,
the
the
lights were in his eyes, and it was the only hat he had.
Yes, he was also in the owner's the owner's box or the equivalent or owner's row, whatever. So I thought the polite thing to do would be to wear a hat for the team for whom he was.
I have just a tiny bit of apathy on this one. So you are the expert, Joseph, and you are enthusiastic and you know about this. So I will join you and give him 3 for that. Well done, Prince Harry, who is still a prince. Excellent. Andrew?
He is. I think it's a 3 as well. I mean, I think it would have been better if he just said, "Have you met my missus?" Like, come on, because I mean, I'm Team Wales, right? I'm Team Cambridge, Team Wales. So I was like, you should just have said, "Have you met the missus?" I just it's so much easier for me just to wear that. But yeah, I mean, it was self-deprecating, banter, humor, everything. So yeah, I think he did a pretty good job of it. And as you say, corrective action.
Yes, corrective action. But what's funny is the original headline said, was like Prince Harry quoted as saying he was under duress for wearing that hat, and the default everyone went to is the assumption that he was under duress as a result of his wife, which of course is not what he was saying. But
I think
if you were giving someone a lesson, Joseph, on how to behave in a scenario where you have cause defense and all the rest of it, would you use that as an example? Is it that good?
I think it's good for a more lighthearted thing. I think it depends, right? If you're dealing with a really serious issue, then no, the humor can only
Yeah.
take you so
It
far.
was-
So it's very
was-
Thank you for
contextual.
explaining that. That is important.
Sorry.
This was for a game of rounders, right? It was for a game of rounders.
Right.
That, for a game of rounders, if you'd started a war accidentally, maybe that wouldn't work so well. Be like, hey, sorry about that whole supporting Nazi Germany. Oh, actually, he did dress as a Nazi once, didn't he? I was just in the wrong place, wrong time. It's okay, but it's okay. I'm team allies now. Don't you worry. It's maybe that wouldn't work quite so well.
But I think there's my dumbass response notwithstanding, I do think that the larger point is we sometimes just take everything too seriously these days, and this is just a guy wearing a hat at a baseball game, for crying out loud, and I think the response is as appropriate for the seriousness of the alleged offense.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I think sometimes we can take ourselves too seriously. Organizations and communicators can take themselves too seriously. I think it would have been worse if he was put out some statement. I didn't realize the degree to which Canadians cared about the Blue Jays game, and this is a Canadian moment, a rallying moment. And these tough times when Canada's at war, in a trade war with the U.S., I should have no. You can imagine a world in which he'd been over scripted and they would have leaned into making this a much bigger deal than it was. And I like that he did it with a smile on his face. It was good. It's authentic.
Yeah.
He's actually very charming, isn't he? He's very charming. It's a bit
Well, actually, that was
I
an
see a lot of
interesting one
myself
to
in
do.
Prince Harry. I see a lot of myself in Prince Harry's. Youthful, charming, witty, good banter. Yeah, maybe I'm team Harry.
I'm not really on anybody's team, but I adore William and Kate. I just think they can't do anything wrong. I think they're amazing.
When I was at
And
the
you were at
coronation,
the coronation.
I was, yes. When I was at the coronation and those two walked in, I thought, oh, wow, they're going to be king and queen one day. And I probably won't be at their coronation.
And we saw Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth 2 times, did we, in Parliament? I remember when she came.
Did, yeah, opening Parliament. I
That
saw
was
a few
amazing.
walkers.
Yeah.
I met
She
her
was
once.
such an amazing lady. Yeah.
I met her and shouted Brigand Ghoul at her, and she didn't know what I said and moved on. Genuine story. I'll tell that another time because we have to
Another
run.
time. Yes, because we are at time. All right, guys. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us. If you haven't already, do subscribe to the show. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify and everywhere else you get your podcasts these days. Talk next week.
I'm going to get in a hot tub now. Don't hear that very often, do you?
Oh.
There's so much to unpack there. Let's unpack that next week. Just tell me,
All right.
is Doug Ford there, or is it just a picture of him by the side of the hot tub?
He'll probably be under discussion. Let's just leave it there.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Bye, guys.